Most myths open on a mountaintop, with thunder, golden thrones, and immortals arguing above the clouds. Ours opens in your kitchen. Sometime this week, you tore a green leaf without looking at it. Something cold and sharp rose from your hand and stayed on your fingers for hours. 3,000 years ago, that smell had a name: Minthe. Long before Persephone descended into the underworld, before Demeter's grief divided the year into seasons, Hades had already discovered that even the kingdom of the dead could shelter something alive. He found her beside the river Cocytus, where the voices of the unburied drifted through the mist. Minthe was a nymph of the dark waters. She belonged to the places where footsteps became echoes, where breath became fog, where the world of the living quietly dissolved into the world below. Unlike every other nymph, she did not fear Hades. She never bowed before his crown or trembled at his name. Instead, she asked him a question no one else ever dared to ask. Why does the god who rules over countless souls always walk alone? The dead begged. The gods demanded. Minthe listened. Their love began before the pomegranate, before Persephone, before the throne of the underworld had a queen. Hades would leave his black palace and meet her beside the silent river where pale reeds moved without wind. There, he was no longer the king of the dead, only a lonely god, sitting beside the one soul who never feared his silence. Minthe believed that silence belonged to them. Then Persephone came. Whether she descended by force or by choice, only the first pomegranate seed remembers the truth. Above them, Demeter searched until grief entered the soil itself. Fields withered. The earth forgot how to give. To restore balance, Persephone would spend half the year beneath the earth and half beneath the sun. When she returned to her mother, spring awakened. When she descended to Hades, the world surrendered to decay. She became more than a queen. She became the rhythm of life and death itself. And Minthe watched another woman become necessary to the order of the universe. At first, Persephone heard only whispers, a shadow that vanished whenever she entered the palace, a fragrance lingering around Hades whenever he returned from the river. Then she saw them. There was no battle, no thunder, no judgment from Olympus. Only two women standing inside a kingdom built by gods, both trapped within destinies neither had truly chosen. Minthe saw a girl who had arrived from the sunlight and taken everything. Persephone saw proof that even a queen could be replaced. Their anger should have belonged to Hades. Instead, it turned toward each other. That is how power often survives. It teaches those beneath it to fight sideways. Minthe spoke first. She said Hades had loved her before the earth ever learned Persephone's name. That one day, he would grow weary of a queen who smelled of spring and return to the woman who understood darkness. Perhaps she spoke from pride, perhaps from fear, perhaps she knew that goddesses rarely leave a rival alive. Persephone's fury reached deeper than the roots above them. She seized Minthe, threw her to the ground, and crushed her beneath her feet. Again and again, until nothing remained but broken earth. No one stopped her, not the judges, not the dead, not even Hades. By the time he reached the riverbank, there was only silence. Hades knelt and pressed his hand into the soil. He did not ask the fates to return her. Even the king of the dead knew there are some deaths that cannot be undone. So he asked only one thing of the earth. If her voice cannot return, let the world remember how she died. And the earth obeyed. Small green shoots pushed through the black soil, fragile, almost invisible. Hades reached down and touched one. A cold fragrance spread through the underworld. Then he understood. The earth had remembered the final moment of her life. Minthe had died beneath the weight of a goddess, so the plant never forgot. Left untouched, it remained silent. But every time another hand pressed its leaves, every time another heel repeated the final movement of her life, it answered in the only language it had left. Not with a scream, not with tears, but with fragrance. The leaf surrendered, its body broke, yet its presence only grew. The very act that had ended Minthe's life had become the way the world would remember her. Hades could not save the woman, so he gave her something death could never erase, a memory that awakened every time her leaves were crushed. Minthe became more than a plant. She became medicine for aching bodies, a fragrance that welcomed guests into their homes, an herb laid upon sacred tables, a blessing carried by healers. Yet the Greeks noticed something stranger still. Mint never truly belonged to ordinary gardens. It always appeared where one world leaned into another, at the doors of temples, at funeral rites, at sacred feasts, at places where life brushed against death. It became the herb of thresholds, the quiet companion of every crossing. Perhaps that is why, when those who longed to hear the voices of the dead prepared for their descent, the priests placed one final ingredient into a sacred cup: barley, water, and mint. Not because it smelled sweet, not because it soothed the body, but because no plant understood the boundary between life and death better than the nymph who had become that boundary herself. Before anyone dared to step toward the realm of Hades, they first drank the memory of the first woman the underworld could never truly bury. They called the drink Kykeon. Whether that sacred cup truly opened the gates of the dead, or merely prepared the soul to cross them, is where our next story begins. So the next time you crush mint between your fingers, watch what happens. The leaf collapses, its shape disappears, yet the fragrance lingers, long after the body is gone. The Greeks believed that was no coincidence. They believed the scent was a memory, the final breath of a nymph who could no longer speak, yet somehow was never truly silenced.